Miami is called the Magic City because it has been hit hard so many times and it always bounces back.
That magic was put to the test in August of 1992.
The unrelenting force of Hurricane Andrew.
Every window in that house blew out.
The destruction from this storm goes beyond anything we've known in recent years.
There were people in the middle of the street with their hands on their heads in shock.
The path of destruction stretches across South Dade.
He's the one that talked us through it, talked everybody through it.
It did things that we've never seen a hurricane do before.
'92 was a really slow year in the tropics, and when a tropical disturbance developed in August, it was just another thing.
The first President Bush was in the White House. There was no such thing as a smartphone, and the Miami area was much different, with distinct neighborhoods, each with their own flavor. All of them unaware that a monster storm was headed their way. When that disturbance was first mentioned by the National Hurricane Center at 10:30 p.m. that Friday evening, the bulletin said it shows no signs of development, which it didn't at that time. That was true. Nobody had any conception of what that system was going to become just over a week later.
We had this unwritten rule not to start advisories off of the nighttime imagery. Well, this looked so good that I wrote the first advisory at 11 p.m. on that Sunday night. I remember coming home and telling my wife, I sure hope this doesn't fall apart. I'll look like a fool if it does. And a week later, I was praying it would fall apart.
The National Hurricane Center forecast had it turning northeast of the Bahamas. They all knew in their minds, and we all knew, that hurricane forecasts were not very good back then. That's your jet ski, Bob?
Yeah. We'd not had a major hurricane strike that area for many years.
It seemed like for years the storms had all been turning north before they got to Florida.
Storms in that area normally went more toward the northwest and then curved out toward the northeast.
Kate Hale Day, that was proclaimed, and that was a great honor, and I was very, very moved by it. To a great extent, you felt like Chicken Little saying the sky's gonna fall, the sky's gonna fall. Because the last two storms they had been through in the 60s, one was a Category 1, and the other one, although it was a 4, went through the Keys, and all Miami got were some side winds, but they associated those weak side winds with the category the storm was when it hit the Keys. They just thought it wasn't gonna be that bad.
Quite honestly, there wasn't a lot of apprehension, there wasn't a lot of anxiousness. We'd had several hurricanes beforehand, and we'd gone through these preparations. It was, basically putting away anything that could be a projectile, making sure our fuel tanks were filled, checking the generators. It was, I don't want to say it was a routine, but it's something we had done before.
The hurricane hunters went out there to investigate, and they actually could not find a closed circulation. And the truth is, the hurricane forecaster on duty that day had written an advisory saying that the airplane could not find a circulation, and this would be the last advisory. And Bob Sheets, the director at the time, very wisely said, let's hang on to this one more time and just see what happens.
The idea of modeling a hurricane, having a computer simulate how a storm is going to move in the atmosphere, was really new. So I introduced visually the idea that we all knew that hurricane forecasts were not precise at that time, much less precise than they are now. So I came up with this scheme of putting lines across the dots, kind of widening as it went into the future, and that eventually evolved in the mid-90s into using the cone. There was a high pressure system that was building off the east coast of the United States, and I was watching for that high pressure to come off, and I noticed that the model was forecasting it to intensify. I thought, if it intensifies, that's going to hold Andrew south. So since it was Friday afternoon in 1992, we didn't have cell phones. People tended to go out on their boats. They would go away for the weekend. They would go to the Keys. So I went on TV that Friday afternoon and said, just want you to all be aware, this is an awareness thing. I didn't forecast it to come, but I said this developing weather pattern could cause the storm to come in our direction and be here very early in the week. And as a result of that, I got credit for being the only one to forecast that Hurricane Andrew was coming, or being the first one. In actual fact, I didn't do that. I just thought there was a risk, really because it was Friday. If it had been Tuesday, I think I probably would have said something different. By Saturday evening, we knew that the odds were getting high that this was going to be something significant. The storm kept leaning to the left, kept staying south, was coming in this general direction. The storm itself was getting better developed and stronger and nastier looking, and there was a general awareness that Saturday evening that it was a threat, a significant threat.
We'd worked so hard preparing for these hurricanes, and that really didn't turn into anything in the past, that I was saying, God, I hope this thing comes this time, because I'm tired of doing all this work for nothing. And I had no idea there was an elderly volunteer who looked at me and said, be careful what you wish for, son. I remember that gentleman now for the rest of my life, and I will never, ever take for granted again the power of these storms.
I was a reporter, a very new reporter on the WSVN news team.
Now this has, of course, been a headache for the people who've been putting in many, many hours. And
at some point, someone at my place had a news program on and said, hey, this Andrew thing's a thing. And I said, no, a couple days ago I was watching and it didn't seem to be anything. Well, no, it looks like it's going to be a thing. And not long after, I got the page, you need to be coming in.
And I went on TV and said, friends, I'm going to go home now and get some sleep, and I suggest you do too, because we may not get sleep tomorrow night, and tomorrow is going to be maybe one of the biggest days in the history of our city. Sunday morning, as I left home, driving out of my neighborhood, I remember looking in my rearview mirror at the street and the house and realizing it was not going to look like this when I came back. At about 2 o'clock in the morning, I realized that Andrew was going to be essentially a worst-case scenario, like a giant tornado coming through South Dade. We had a reporter at Dade County Emergency Management. He said to me, can you tell people something to reassure them that it's going to be okay and they're going to be safe? And I said, there's no place that's going to be safe in Dade County tonight. What I knew was wherever it went, it was going to be hellacious. So 30 years ago, after the storm, when you look back here, what did you see? Where was the old house?
It was about where it is now, but it was a lot longer.
This is preparations for Hurricane Andrew. We put tie downs on the boat to hopefully keep it from moving around too much.
I think we thought we were hurricane ready because we'd been through other small ones. We went to bed. I said, well, it's gonna wake us up in the middle of the night. Well, go get some sleep now.
Everybody's going to sleep. Should be by about 2 o'clock. This is Hurricane Andrew. It's getting close.
And as it turned out, we found out that our son was making his own recording of all this.
He had a little pocket tape recorder. He clipped the thing to his shirt, and we didn't know it.
It's 9:40, and all is quiet, stars are out, and a whole lot's going on, really.
I remember we woke up, but I'm not sure if he woke us up or I think just the storm.
I just woke up. I'm not exactly sure what time it is, but it is storming outside. Holy. This sounds like a freight train is coming through non-stop. Oh my God.
It sounded terrible.
A train coming through.
I mean, it really sounded bad.
At 4 a.m., the winds really started to pick up. The center of the storm was just approaching this line of islands that's just offshore of Biscayne Bay, but the donut of winds was already moving over the land. I said, this is it. Get in your safe place now.
It's just really loud outside. Unbelievable. just saw a little bit of lightning. The eye is closed. This is it.
Video room. Wall is shaking. Where there's, see if you can find there's 2x4s we had before. Maybe we can brace this with the 2x4. They're in the kitchen by the stove. Ain't nothing we can really do.
And I was just racking my brain to think, what could people do in their homes beyond just getting prepared that I hadn't thought of? And the mattress came to me. And I said, friends, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get a mattress off the bed, and when this thing starts, get you and your family under there and ride this thing out.
Okay, so it's gonna lay on top of this way. Yeah. I think we got it. Fine, as long as we're under the mattress, we're all right. All right.
Sandy had gone down the hall and got the mattress off a king-size bed and put it in the hallway, and we just rode it out underneath the mattress.
Okay. It's all right. We're underneath the mattress. We're fine. Kara, it's okay. No, yes, it is, honey. It's gonna be fine. Yeah, very
At Fox Weather, no matter the situation, we've got you covered.
Through the best and worst weather and everything in between.
We're all in this together.
Because there's nothing more important to us than keeping you safe.
From morning forecasts to holiday travel, we're here for you.
We have a passion for weather and a passion for people. That's why we love what we do.
Fox Weather, weathering it together.
When was the point that you realized that this was going to be bad?
When Ian said, "There goes the roof," that got our attention. I can't say there was ever any fear. Now, people say, weren't you scared to death? No, we weren't, because we were more worried about each other.
We only got a little bit longer to go.
Our youngest daughter, Kara, Ian says, there goes the roof, and she screamed.
Being under the mattress, and when you'd hear a loud crash, and then, I'd say, "Sandy, you all right?" She says, "Yeah." "Kara, you all right?" And we'd go around the circle, make sure everybody was all right. I remember Bryan saying on TV that right now people are dying in South Bay, and he was right.
Every year we were told we were long overdue, that eventually we would get the big storm. This year, the big storm arrived.
The last live shot I did was in a live truck. The truck was literally starting to rock.
Watching Andrew from the streets may be unwise, but it's also unbelievable.
We weren't bright. We thought it was great. We're on TV, the truck is rocking, not realizing that this is not the best place in the world to be.
The center of Hurricane Andrew came in about 6 miles south of here at a place called Fender Point. But the peak winds were right here, in a corridor right here, and they pushed Biscayne Bay up to incredible heights, including at the Burger King headquarters, which is just south here of the Deering Estate property, and all the way through and up against the house. The waves were crashing on the second floor. Those waters in Biscayne Bay were pushed up 17 feet and came flooding in here. This wood building was built in 1900. It was completely destroyed by the storm surge, but the stone building survived. It was built in 1922, and it's a fortress. The amazing thing about Andrew was that peak storm tide happened where nobody lived. It was a Burger King headquarters, and it was this Deering Estate Park. Nobody was there, nobody was hurt. Nobody was caught in that unsurvivable situation. Andrew's eye showed up as a donut on the radar. We could track it very, very clearly. The strongest wind gusts, probably over 200 miles an hour, came over certain neighborhoods, and that's when the stunning damage was done. Andrew was the first super intense hurricane of modern time when we had modern technology to actually measure it and see it. So some ideas we had about hurricanes proved not to be true. We always thought that the back end of the storm would be the weaker end of the storm, the bottom end of the storm, but that turned out not to be true either. It was the back end of the storm that demolished Homestead Air Force Base.
I was scared to death.
Felt like you were in a war.
Yeah. I was scared to death.
Homestead Air Force Base was obliterated by Andrew. The center of the hurricane went directly over it.
Down here is the alert facility, and that's where the ride-out team thought that it was the strongest and best place to be during the storm. And
little did they know, right?
And little did they know. There was probably a 25 in what they call a ride-out team, mainly police, firemen, senior base personnel, emergency managers, those type of people. And they stayed at, we call it our alert facility, thinking that that was a hardened facility. Well, as it turned out, it wasn't a hardened facility. And I think every one of those people that were in there wished that they never stayed back.
Before the storm, they told me they had hurricane-proof hangars.
We put a couple of our really broke F-16s in there, but that really didn't help at all.
So yeah, that was the one they called a hurricane-proof hangar.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
But they didn't have Andrew-proof hangars. Probably would have stood up to most hurricanes, but not that one. The National Hurricane Center was right at the north end of the eye wall, the intense winds in Andrew, especially above the ground. On the top of the Hurricane Center was the Miami radar, and it was this big golf ball that had this machine inside of it that scanned the skies.
I was on the air, I think, and then boom, and it shook the building.
We heard a big boom.
And so everybody's looking around, and we had no radar.
And it came crashing down on top of the National Hurricane Center building.
The radar itself fell off the building. The dome around the radar broke up into pieces and was blown, next door.
That took that right off of there. That was a shock that it happened.
That's when we knew, we were in trouble there. About half the people that worked at the Hurricane Center lived in the area that was struck by the core of Andrew. We're, wondering about our families and how they made out.
At about 5 a.m., people started calling in from homes that were coming apart. I mean, as frightened as they could be, they're trying to get information to tell their family what to do beyond what they were doing. And I told several callers, all you can do is hold that door. Get the family on the door of the bathroom or on the door of the bedroom, wherever you are. If you're safe where you are now, keep the storm outside of that room. I just tried to reassure them and mostly wanted them to know that they had something they could do, which was hold the door. Hold the door where they were, the room they were in.
We had a radio in there. I think Kara had the radio, and we were listening to you on the radio, and when they decided, we could get out, it was about the time you said, everybody stay in place, there's one more band to come through.
I stopped and looked at the eyes, and I really, you see at the eyes, the totally, I saw that, and
You talked us through it, talked everybody through it in South Florida.
I was listening and watching you, and then all of a sudden the power went out, but they were simulcasting everything on the radio.
Kept us calm, maybe, or a little bit calmer than normal, than we would have been.
After the hurricane, some of them moved the mattress and saw the sky because the roof had been ripped off the house.
There was the driveway, so right about in here would have been probably the front door. As soon as we got under the mattress.
Roof lifted.
Well, I mean, roofs look like airplane wings, they want to fly. Remember it like it was yesterday.
If you lived through it, yeah, it was like yesterday.
It was after we got out and when the storm was gone and we could walk around and look at things that we really got scared, because then we saw what could have happened. And when you see the tie bar from the front of the house sitting on top of a boat in the backyard, it gets your attention. Then you realize just how close you came, maybe getting killed.
This is the aftermath of the hurricane. The house is gone. There's what's left on my boat. We rode out the storm under the mattress.
You realize, how close you came to dying.
The world was completely different. Everything was changed.
The Fox Weather app.
Make sure your Fox Weather notifications are on.
Not just a forecast, an experience. Easily accessible. With the tap of a finger.
Only as time passes, this is going to get worse.
The power of the storm is being unleashed.
Fast, reliable, and best of all, tailored to your location and your needs.
We do appreciate you joining us here on Fox Weather.
Fox Weather, we've got you covered. Download the free app now and make it your own.
It was about that time, 7:30 in the morning on August 24th, that people moved the mattress, came out of their bathroom, out of their closet, and looked outside.
I kept getting reports of people who are literally walking around looking like zombies. They are staring, they're not talking, they're just walking around in total disbelief of what, there's just no way they could comprehend what they were seeing.
We didn't realize it until the sun came up.
And now we're looking at a building there that was just totally wiped out.
We were kind of wondering how we're going to cover this. I mean, it's one thing to be in it, and then the next is to remember the next morning and see, I mean, this is devastation.
And that's when we saw nothing. There was nothing there, and that's when you went, holy hell.
Being in the helicopter in the first couple of days after the storm gave me an opportunity to see everything firsthand from up there, and it was probably the best vantage point to see the size of the destruction. And at the time there was a pilot, his name was Maurice Johnson, he was a retired Air Force colonel, and that was the way they elected to do the reporting.
Maurice, as an ex-military man, obviously you're not that far from the Air Force base. We've heard the devastation down there. What have you heard about what the condition of Homestead is?
Homestead Air Force right now is nothing but a runway.
That's it?
That's it.
It looked like a bomb had gone off, but you knew it wasn't a bomb. You knew that it was Mother Nature. You knew that it was a storm. You knew that it was a storm like every other storm that you'd heard of before that was a threat, but this one had done its job.
Maurice, let me ask you, people talk about this looking like a war zone. You have a a very long military past, flying helicopters in Vietnam. Compare this a little bit.
This looks worse than some of the places I've seen where bombs have gone off and we did a good job. I think that you could put this in perspective probably in the same context as Hiroshima.
I remember one of the generals coming through and saying it looks like a nuclear bomb went off, or many, many nuclear bombs went off, because it was total. Everything was demolished.
There were no trees, there were cars flipped over.
When I tried to explain it to people who weren't here years later, I said, well, imagine going to your corner, just standing outside and doing a 360, and every single thing is gone. Not just the road signs, the stop signs, the traffic lights, the trees, the house, the condo, it's all just gone. It's just piles of things.
Every house was damaged or destroyed. It was impossible to conceive of that all happening in just those 2 or 3 hours. We know the winds were stunning in Andrew for a number of reasons. One is we saw what happened to the houses. Another is, well, there's a 2x4 that was stuck in a palm tree 30 or 40 feet above the ground. It's just hard to imagine even today how that could have happened, except that we saw plywood splitting palm trees too, and we saw wood going through concrete walls. So we know the winds were so incredibly strong that somehow all that happened. It's just hard to believe. It was a testament to the incredible strength of the storm. I mean, nobody thought that something like that could happen. And unfortunately, when those buildings came apart, several people died because of flying wood or debris, and they got caught when the buildings came apart. Everything was changed.
I was fortunate to be able to go up in one of the news helicopters right after the storm, and I took a photograph that I matched up with the photograph that I ironically took a few days before the storm. And when you look at this beautiful green forest in the middle of Miami-Dade County, and the next image looks like a war zone, it's very impactful. You couldn't write the kind of stuff that I was seeing. I remember taking the photograph of this trailer in the center of the pen with the rhino standing right next to it. And I think, my God, this must have been like the Wizard of Oz, you know, like the house coming out of the sky. And then I saw a troop of monkeys running down the middle of the road, and they weren't our monkeys. I later found out that they were actually primates from the University of Miami Primate Center that was right next door to us. It was a surreal, surreal environment.
All right, well, here's the house originally.
So this is well before the storm. This is just the shot you had of the house, right?
Here's a mattress we were under.
Just in that little space there. Yeah, that's where you were.
The four of us. Here's our house, our life in the circle down here.
Just a big pile. I mean, that must have been kind of eerie, knowing that everything in the house, of the house, was in that pile at the end of the circle.
We were still finding things that we wanted to save, even after they hauled everything out to the traffic circle.
Is that the boat there?
That's a boat, yeah.
Wow, that's the back of the boat.
It flipped one way and then the other way, and the top part twisted off and came down on top of it somehow. And that was what's left of it in the backyard.
And of course, here's the rubble.
Before Andrew, a lot of boat owners took their boats out of here because the hurricane was coming, but not all of them. And when Andrew pushed the ocean water into Biscayne Bay, it rose up like 9 feet, and a lot of the rest of the boats ended up there on Bayshore Drive.
I have no idea just how bad it is till I get to Louisiana and have, communications. Can't get a hold of my wife. My assignment was to go to the Bahamas. And I figured, great, I'm gonna go to the Bahamas because this is just gonna be a storm that keeps tracking north. Then we'll come back and we'll chase it like we always do to the Carolinas and stuff like that. It made that left turn and went straight across from the Bahamas. My wife is at home in a trashed house with my 4-month-old son, my first child, all by themselves under a mattress. I was like, I made the biggest mistake of my career in my life. I go home and then my wife is gone. My neighborhood is a ghost town. There's nobody around. The only thing is the last dying batteries of smoke detectors and alarms on batteries. So it was so bizarre to be that disoriented when you knew everything, everything was out of place.
Our generation, we've never seen such devastation before. It looked like a war zone here in Homestead.
Homestead was unrecognizable.
You could not recognize Homestead. I'd been here all my life, and I had a hard time getting around.
I actually physically was lost in my own hometown.
Occasionally you would see a building and say, I remember that building, but it was wrecked.
And we had police officers and firefighters who had worked those areas much of their careers, getting lost constantly because all the street signs were gone, the trees were gone, the landscape, the housing, the buildings, it was all so different looking.
It was a question of whether Homestead would come back as a town. The second night, though, some of the people that had bad intentions finally were moving around.
It really became a situation in that first week or so of every man and woman for herself, and that was also really scary.
We had to establish security because we wanted to prevent looting.
After a while, there's people that weren't in the affected areas. They would be driving in to the areas they knew were abandoned, and they were looting the hell out of whatever they could find in these houses.
People were determined that they were going to protect what they had, and so they got out their guns.
The "you loot, we shoot" kind of signs were going up everywhere. There were even literally children sitting outside of their garages with guns.
Anarchy set in South Dade.
It was scary because I realized there's a really thin layer that keeps society together by obeying the rules. And if you just decide to not obey the rules, it gets ugly quick.
The government could not respond. There were people with guns everywhere. I thought that Wednesday night, how can this ever recover? It was a hellish week.
When you look at the area of impact and you look at the number of people, you know you're talking well over 1 million people. And I don't think anybody at that point in time had ever been faced with that kind of excruciatingly severe need all at once.
They hadn't seen authorities, and getting water and help for many, many people was very, very difficult.
We were frustrated because we knew that there were services that should have been there that were not. And there was certainly there wasn't the collaborative spirit, and we're all speaking with one tongue kind of a approach to this that there could have been.
Kate Hale was the Director of Emergency Management in Dade County, and she had barely slept in the 3 days after the storm, and she had been trying to motivate the bureaucracy to come help.
We got basically no support down here for the first couple days after Andrew.
And we were getting that question. We're being told these resources are coming in. We're being told you're getting what you need. We're being told these things have been deployed, and they had not been.
She'd about reached her wit's end.
I would like everybody to follow up on the commitments they made.
And they're not so far?
You tell me, do you see them?
The federal government wasn't doing it, the state didn't have the ability, the local resources have been decimated.
And I was kneeling in front of her, and she got emotional.
Sounds this
It is demoralizing to know that as you are out there trying desperately to have everybody say, why aren't you doing anything?
It really came down to, I was just at that point, I hadn't slept much in 5 days, and certainly the filters were worn off.
Well, you talk about...
You all live in this community, most of you. You know what's going on. Help us. Help us.
She really struck the chord that the coordination among state, local, and federal was just not that good at that point in time.
And then in just frustration, I guess kind of what in most cases would have been an under your breath, off the cuff comment, it was,
All I know are a lot of people are saying, why aren't we doing more? We're doing everything we can. Where in the hell is the cavalry on this one?
It wasn't a formal statement. Certainly it wasn't something I thought of in advance, but it seemed to galvanize people.
Hello, Fox Weather users. I'm Janice Dean. The Fox Weather app is changing the game with custom features you've got to take advantage of. I'm here to guide you through these features so you can get the most out of your Fox Weather experience. Let me tell you about my favorite feature on the Fox Weather app, Future View. Fox Future View is a feature you can't find anywhere else. With a few simple steps, Future View allows you to track the weather in advance of any big events you have planned for the year. Going on vacation? Booking your honeymoon? Maybe a destination wedding or party? This is the perfect tool to help you plan ahead. Get a future forecast anywhere in the world nearly a year in advance. Here's how it works. Hit the Plan tab at the bottom of your screen. Then hit Create Event. Give it a name. Let's say Spring Break Trip. Then add a location, maybe to Miami. Pick a start and end date. Add a category, and turn on notifications so we can alert you as your event gets closer. Then click Create. That's it. Give it a try now. This is just one of many great features the Fox Weather app provides to you. This app is full of all kinds of great customizable tools. So dive in and make the Fox Weather app your very own. Fox Weather, weathering it together.
All I know are a lot of people are saying, why aren't we doing more? We're doing everything we can. Where in the hell is the cavalry on this one?
That reached Washington. President Bush saw that, finally took action, and the military was on the way.
All of us are concerned, and I'll say that the rest of America, to the people in Florida, the rest of America is here to back you up in any way we can.
What did the runway look like that needed to be dealt with before planes could land?
Well, the tower was destroyed. The lighting and the communications, you had to have some type of air traffic control system in here to where you could, communicate with the airplanes. And then you had a lot of debris. The debris wasn't that big of a deal. Once that happened, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, there was nothing but aircraft landing out here on the flight line.
Is the runway the same as it was in 1992?
Exactly the same. It's the same length, 11,300 feet long. It's one of the longest runways in Florida, actually.
Then the planes came, and this is where they would unload?
Yes, this area right over here mainly was where all the big planes would unload, and you had teams that would offload them, take them to wherever they were staging them.
So trucks came in and
trucks
picked that
would
up,
come in, take them to wherever they needed to go.
Do you remember the feeling of having the military finally coming and taking charge?
Fantastic. The state did bring in some Guard members, but it was so nice to get that active duty military force in here. And then they set up the tents down at Harris Field.
It was 30 years ago since I was in Harris Field Park here and down this street.
This is it right here, right?
This is it. Harris Field was an empty space in the middle of Homestead with destruction all around. Everything around this open area in the middle of Homestead was destroyed. Every house, every business. So this is where the military came. They needed a space to set up a tent city. As far as you could see, in that direction, it was lines of tents, big tents that would take whole families. It was like something in a war. It was exactly like something in a war. We knew in the tent city that not enough people were there. There were more people still in Homestead than were coming. People don't want to leave home. They just don't want to leave home. They want to cling to their old life as long as they can. After the storm, Governor Lawton Chiles of Florida asked me to be on a commission where we were going to study what happened, how we could do better, and how we could just never let it happen again. We looked at emergency management and we looked at building codes.
Prior to the new code, you could submit, a few sheets of paper for a brand new home, we're calling it a simple home, and get your permit. After Hurricane Andrew, all that changed. That actually showed the weaknesses of our code.
Miami-Dade County adopted new building codes with the determination that the next Andrew that comes along is not going to do the same kind of damage and people are going to be safe in their homes. Here's the building code now, but before Hurricane Andrew, when an inspector went out, what did they take with them?
Well, generally our code book.
This was the code book.
This was a great code book. It's a single volume. It contained all that we needed to enforce.
The old building code wasn't bad. It wasn't terrible. It just had these loopholes in it, and Andrew, being so strong, exploited every weakness. Then the 1994 code comes out, and there's Andrew on that night.
We use that as the cover, Hurricane Andrew.
That's Henry over there. Henry! he gets caught up with girls.
Ron McGill has been the face of Zoo Miami as long as I can remember, since before Hurricane Andrew, when it was called Metro Zoo. And during the storm, he was there, and the team there had a mission to save the animals and figure out how to do it.
Come on. There you go. Give me something. I remember driving right up to our founding director, Robert Yokel, and he just looked at me and said, the aviary's gone. And I went, wow, it's gone? What do you mean gone? He goes, gone. The entire structure came down like a house of cards. What we're in here today is a newly rebuilt aviary. This is the aviary that replaced the one originally built for $3 million, and this one cost us $13 million. And you know, you can look at these center poles here. These are all constructed of metal. They meet a building code that is, I believe, one of the strictest in the nation right now.
So this aviary was built with Hurricane Andrew in mind?
Absolutely. Hurricane Andrew was the guiding factor in reconstructing this. You know, the flamingos, the routine has always been, they were out in an open lake in the entrance to the zoo there. We had to catch them up because they were exposed, of course, into the lake. And what we did was we used the public restrooms as bunkers. And I remember catching these flamingos, you know, it was a big thing, catching them and putting them in the bathroom. And I saw all these flamingos standing there next to the sink, next to the stalls. And I said, I'm just going to take a quick picture of that. They were hiding under the sink looking at us like, this is not where we belong. But you know, at the end of the day, it did save their lives.
So this is all new. This is it, huh? After the hurricane.
This is all brand new flamingo exhibit, and we designed it in such a way that the flamingos are on exhibit, and right back there, that building, you'll see some doors hidden behind a little bush back there. Those double doors, those flamingos can be herded into behind that fence and herded right into that building. So we don't have to go through the stress of catching them out here anymore. We can just open that door, and they've been trained to go in on their own. They're locked in there, and they'll be safe, hopefully, during a future storm.
The way that the code changed is, and all the engineering that goes behind it, significantly strengthen all these structures today. But you have to keep in mind that Hurricane Andrew is also a Category 5. Now, even today, you know, building to the current codes, they're not really built up to a Category 5 level. But, you know, the confidence level certainly today is a lot higher than it was before.
The story of that hurricane that will always be most indelible in my mind is afterwards, people started donating money to help the zoo. And I remember opening these cards from every state in the country. But then I opened one with a return address of Homestead. And I said, why would somebody in Homestead be sending money to the zoo when that city was destroyed? And I opened it up and it said, please accept this check in the memory of our daughter who died during the storm. And I was just like, I felt like somebody kicked me in the gut. I go, what? My daughter's name was Naomi Browning. And I remember that name because she was a volunteer here at the zoo.
I think about the people who died. I think about specific people who died and wonder. There was a little girl, Naomi Browning, who died, and it was a building code issue.
I contacted her and I said, Mrs. Browning, first of all, I don't know what to say. I don't know how do you comfort someone who's lost their child? But what made you think of the zoo? And she told me the story of how she was in bed with Naomi and the wind was blowing. And Naomi loved animals so much. She loved the zoo so much. And one of Naomi's last words to her mother was, Mom, I'm so worried about the animals at the zoo. And right after that happened, a beam came crashing through the wall and killed the young lady. 12-year-old volunteer instantly.
And I think of how young she was and how much she had already made a difference. And I wonder what kind of a gift she would have ultimately given to the world if she'd been allowed to grow up.
Her favorite animal was the tigers, and we always, from then on, it's the Naomi Browning Tiger exhibit, and her memorial is still there in front of the exhibit.
In the years before Andrew, there was a rodeo here. It was a major attraction in Homestead, and then that all changed August 24th, 1992. The rodeo was wiped out, all the trees were down, it was an empty space. And then the military came and changed it into a whole different kind of energy and a different kind of space. And then when that was over, it became once again a city place. It's a great football and soccer stadium here that people in this area can use, and they use it every year, and it's a vibrant part of the city. People that were here in 1992 will never forget it. But the town has more than recovered. The old parts of town were rebuilt. Many parts of this town are new and vibrant. There's a great irony here that this has swung, the emotions here have swung from the intense grief that people felt. So now it's a place where kids play soccer, play football. It's just a 180-degree opposite in terms of the emotions that are part of this part of Homestead, and this space in Greater Miami.
At Fox Weather, no matter the situation, we've got you covered.
Through the best and worst weather and everything in between.
We're all in this together.
Because there's nothing more important to us than keeping you safe.
From morning forecasts to holiday travel, we're here for you.
We have a passion for weather and a passion for people. That's why we love what we do.
Fox Weather, weathering it together.
Miami is a different city now than it was 30 years ago. Hey Nick, this is a really cool store.
Oh, thanks man. I got some really cool stuff to show you. So this is our collection of Hurricane Andrew shirts. We've been collecting for a few years.
Boy, I remember that. I still get pictures of people that show me that shirt. Put that on and show me that shirt, like every year on the anniversary. Through circumstances and preparation and some luck, my voice ended up being the voice on the radio for most people that followed the coverage of Hurricane Andrew. Everybody that went through it has a story. The Deering Hospital, down by the Deering estate, boy, did they have a time there.
So I grew up in that area.
And what happened?
So our house, it was completely unrecognizable. The roof had been ripped off. We found my crib at the time, a few houses down actually, in somebody's pool.
How did you go from 30 years ago, being 2 years old, to doing something that I don't think anybody has ever done, is collect Andrew's shirts? And this is only part of them, right? You've got boxes of them.
So this is a small part of the collection. So our goal is to actually create a coffee table book for the 30th anniversary. Mm-hmm. When we decided to name the store Andrew, we wanted to have something that actually kind of meant something to the community down here. And everybody in Miami, if you were here through the 80s into the 90s, remembers Andrew as this kind of pivotal moment for the city.
And Andrew puts a speed bump in your brain and you start thinking of, did that happen before Andrew or did that happen after Andrew?
But around here, it's BA and AA. It's before Andrew and after Andrew.
30 years later, we're still saying before Andrew and after Andrew. Mm-hmm.
If it had come farther north in Dade County, if it had hit downtown Miami, Broward County would have had a significant effect with just that 12-mile deviation. And at that time, 12 miles was nothing in terms of a forecast error. If Andrew came again, it would be horrible.
I think the damage would be a lot less, but it would still be severe because that was a major, major hurricane. Today, so many people in South Florida, you wonder how many were here for Andrew. And if you told them, get ready, here comes another storm, it's going to be another Andrew, would they say, no, whatever?
I think our memories are pretty short to some extent.
You worry more about the people that haven't been through a major storm that are down here now.
When I look at all of the people who are at risk to the next Andrew, it's formidable. It's an amazing challenge.
But there would be safe buildings and safe homes, and people could have confidence in their homes. The homes were built with Hurricane Andrew in mind.
We know how to build better. We know how to build smarter.
It changed what we built, where we built them.
Buildings are strong. Buildings are like fortresses here now. When you go inside and try and move a sliding glass door, it's like opening a bank vault. Miami-Dade County leads the world in building codes for hurricanes.
I will never forget, as long as I live, in that helicopter looking down and saying, I can't even believe this happened. I can't even believe how bad it is.
As a 24-year-old reporter at the time, I had never seen or even imagined anything like it. And it rattled me to my core.
My biggest regret still is the fact that I left my family. I totally misjudged. I just made the worst decision, not preparing the house at least.
The thing that sticks with me is that there are people that live down there that rebuilt their homes. They could have said, I'm out. And I'm sure there were people that did that.
If there's another big hurricane coming along, or you feel good being in this house?
Yeah. Yep.
You're not going anywhere?
Yeah. No.
You got to meet people that you've seen and never talked to. We had people come by who they just, can we help?
It is in the shadow of each other where people find safety.
Why did it take this tragedy to bring us together to understand how important it is to know your neighbors, to know your neighborhood, and to build those bonds that really make a neighborhood what it is?
Many of those relationships live today.
Shows our resilience to identify the things in a community or in a neighborhood that make it worth staying. And I think the people that are there now, that were there during Hurricane Andrew, have found those things.
Miami is a cosmopolitan city now in ways that we couldn't envision 30 years ago. It's the capital of Latin America. It's a banking center. It's a center of culture. They're building high rises to 80 and 100 stories like there's no tomorrow. It's changed since Hurricane Andrew, but it's become even more amazing than it was back then.